Hey, welcome to Guitar Knobs, the guitars, gear, noise, and nonsense podcast, hosted today by these knobs.
Tony Dudzik, Pick Guardian.
Jared Brandon Mahone Pickups.
Hey, it's me, Todd Novak. We are super happy that you are with us on this lovely show, the show called the Guitar Knobs Podcast. And to my right, we also have another guest in studio.
Zach Oswald from Brandon Wound Pickups.
Excellent. Zach has joined Brandon Wound Pickups, working with Jared. And he's been on our show a couple times. He also has a great little YouTube channel out there. What's it called?
It's just my name, just Zach Oswald.
Zach Oswald.
Does Guitar of the Week. It's awesome. Check it out.
Yep.
Thanks.
So, Tony Baloney.
Don't we have somebody on the other end?
Well, I was going to prompt that, but let's just introduce him anyways.
Okay.
Who's on the line?
This is Sean Arbow of Gunstreet Wiring Shop.
Yes, Sean Arbow, Gunstreet Wiring Shop.
Yeah.
And I think in the name we understand he makes
guns.
Or streets. He makes wiring harnesses for guitars.
Takes the guns out of the streets.
Yes.
Now I get it.
Yes. So Tony, based on who we just introduced, what's this show all about?
Well, this show is all about talking to builders, boutique builders, if you will, sometimes, of guitars and amplifiers and pedals and pickups and occasionally wiring harnesses.
Yes.
And pick guards.
Yeah,
I know a
right.
guy that make pick
all
guards.
kinds of things.
yeah.
So anybody that's out there doing it for themselves, we try to put the spotlight on them and get our audience to know them a little bit better.
That's right.
And Sean has fallen squarely into our tractor beam. Yes. So Sean, where are you coming from tonight?
So I'm coming from Bend, Oregon. It is the eastern part of Oregon, not to be confused with Portland. Most people, when they think of Oregon, they think of Portland, which
And how do you say where you live?
Oregon. I remember, I think it was Tony one time on an episode said it was Oregon.
Yes.
It is Oregon, but it's common happens.
Yeah, they're not called Oregonians.
Well, they should be.
It should be.
They're called
Depending where you're
Oregonians.
from.
But so that's neither here nor there. Whatever.
Sorry for the mispronunciation, all you
I am highly
Oregonians.
offended. Highly
It's
offended.
Oregon, like the kind you play.
Exactly.
We got a lot going on this show today, so let's get to it. I have a few announcements, and any of you guys have some announcements?
Let's listen to your
Okay,
announcements.
we'll do my announcements first here. I want to, first of all, welcome a new patron.
Oh.
A new executive producer.
Holy
Patron.
smokes.
Does he get his name right on the thing?
He does get his name right on the thing a little bit later. His name is Brian Robinson, and this is a new thing that I just decided to do because I was like, hey, when somebody comes on, let's share a little bit.
Cuckoo,
right.
cuckoo, Mr. Robinson.
And basically by a little bit, I just said, hey, what's your 4 on the floor? So I'm just gonna name off what Brian Robinson's 4 on the floor was.
Awesome.
He chose the Earthquaker Devices Eruptor, the Boss CS3 with the Monty Alums Octoplus mod. Whoa, I'm not familiar with that one, but it sounds dangerous. The Analog Alien Rumble Seat and the Mr. Black Boost Tiger. I believe Mr. Black is from up that way, so he might up your way, isn't it? Isn't he up in the northwest?
Like in Reservoir Dogs, Mr. Black, Mr. Pink.
Yeah, I think that's what it's probably from, actually.
I think so. I know there's a lot of pedal builders in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah. He's one of those elusive ones that, like, there's not a single picture of him on the internet.
Like Dr. No.
It might be a small child building. I'm not really sure. Like Dr. No, but he doesn't wear a mask either. So anyways, that's his 4 on the floor. We welcome Brian Robinson.
Thank you
for supporting our show. And we're going to tell you how to support our show at the end of the show. We very much appreciate your support. Second of all, I wanted to call out somebody. Kelsey Austin sent me a really interesting email. We get plenty of emails all the time, but this one, whenever somebody has something that has made sort of a change in their life, I think that's worth highlighting. So his name's Kelsey Austin, and he sent me I'm just going to read a brief blurb about from the email here. He said, I'm a guitar player of 20 years, a guitar lover, and a bit of a gearhead. I primarily want to thank you. Your podcast has become a great source of entertainment, learning, and inspiration for me. I truly appreciate that. He says, it got me to thinking about guitar after a long stint of ignoring my 6-string, a long, sad band breakup story. You helped me inspire to pick up my axe again. I even started a website and blog with setup guides, reviews, tutorials, and other resources for guitar players. Might as well do some good with the passion I still have for guitar. Becoming a rock star didn't happen for me despite years of effort and dedication. Many of us are nodding our heads right now. Not me. I'm still trying. That's
Is there a problem with your neck that you can't nod anymore?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. That's just the way it turns out for most of us, and that's life. Just wanted to thank you for your influence, and you have unwittingly had in my own life. I thought I would share my story and ask for a hand in getting the site's name out there. I'm sure you get requests daily, but I'm a real person that would really benefit from any help you might be able to so generously give. Feel free to share my story. I hope the site can be a resource for guitarists all over the world someday. His site is called axedoctor.com, and he's got some really good stuff on there. So go check that out, everybody.
That's very cool.
So thanks so much for Kelsey for sending that, a nice personal note. We really appreciate it. Whatever it is, long, short, we don't care.
Thank you.
Give us a holler, man. I think that's it for me, at least right now.
Nice.
Anybody else? No?
No.
Nope. Okay, cool. Let's get on with the show. What did you do in your music guitar week this week, Jared?
Okay. So everybody knows I wind pickups, and this week I'm going to talk about that because that's all I've been doing, because it's going to be a pretty busy couple of weekends coming up. So I got a few new old machines, and they are from, gosh, I don't know, the 50s or 60s.
Yeah, those are older than that.
You think so?
Yeah.
They could be. The one is older than the other, but they are George Stevens. Very interesting machines. And I also helped another pickup winder pick out a really good machine. He got a steal on another machine. And I also helped him design the tooling for that machine. It felt really good this week to help someone else in my field, even though I won't profit from that, per se, putting money in my pocket. But it just, when you help somebody like that, it just goes a long way. Yeah, I was glad I was able to do that. So, yeah, it was really exciting for me to add a few more things to my shop.
So how many winders are you up to now?
I have 10 winders that are in service.
That's impressive.
That is very impressive.
So they're 9 of them are automated, and 1 of them is for hand layering.
For what?
Hand layering. It's like hand winding.
Oh.
I control the wire going onto the bobbin.
Oh, so
The machine turns the bobbin, but I control the tension and layering.
What is that useful for?
That is useful for rewinds if you want to do like some pre-60s type Fender pickups,
kinda
or
like scatterwound.
scatter winding and old stuff like that.
For those who aren't aware of scatterwinding, tell me about that a little bit.
Scatter winding is a lot of winders put hand winding and scatter winding in it's pretty much the same thing. When you have a bobbin, say like a Fender Stratocaster or Telecaster bobbin that doesn't have any wire ready to be wound, you would attach it to a winder, and you would use your hand. That means you're directing the wire and using your hand while the bobbin is spinning, and it's basically up to you how the wire is layered onto the bobbin. And
So you
what's the benefit of that?
Well, you can get like air spaces and things like that. Is that right?
we're going to go into some like,
Just to give us we're going up the elevator. Tell me what the scatter wound does.
okay.
It's an imperfect way of winding.
It is. It's kind of like Seymour Duncan kind of claims that there's mojo to it. And I think you can get a certain mojo when you
So it's just
wind.
another little thing that you can do to personalize your guitar
One
and
little
maybe get a
trick.
little bit something different than everybody else.
Generally, you're
So you make it totally unique.
That's right. Generally, in pickup winding, they're mostly automatedly wound. And your smaller boutique people have hand winding machines because they're very inexpensive. Mm-hmm. They use that for marketing because, hey, these are hand wound. These
Sure.
are handmade. It could or could not make an audible difference. That's for someone else to judge, not me.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair.
Cool.
Cool. Nice. Let's go to Sean. Hear from him real quick. What is going on in your music world, man?
Just filling orders, getting busier and busier, getting ready for, this will, maybe when this releases, probably be post NAMM, but I'm going to my first NAMM this year, the Winter NAMM.
And we will see you there.
We'll see you there.
Exactly, yeah. I'm not going to have a booth, but I'm going to come just linger around and just enjoy the sights and see you always hear all the myths about NAMM, so I want to see it for myself.
Yeah, well, we're doing the same thing, so we'll make sure and just play a little tag there, okay?
You can get a lot of sourcing done just walking around.
Yes.
Well, I bet.
With your own business, so.
Cool, man. Zach.
Well, I've been working on a couple of old Gibson ES 175s last week or so, and I'm getting them ready for a video. And I'm doing like a pickup and wiring comparison, like, the old original PAFs versus, something like branded wound or a boutique clone. And I want to try, the old wiring with the central labs versus new wiring.
That would come up tonight.
Right, yeah, exactly. And I'm just trying to get them set up as close as possible, get the pickup heights right and everything, get them tweaked, same bridges and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, are you going to match the pots?
What's that?
Are you going to match the pots? So like a vintage harness, there's enough variants of vintage pots that they're like all over the place.
Oh yeah, they're crazy. They're CTS vintage tapers, so they get pretty close to the old Central Labs. I can't take exact readings because they're the old ones are in the pot cans, which are sealed.
Okay, yeah.
And you don't really want to don't want to mess with them. But yeah, I'm gonna get as close as I can. Capacitor value and all that good stuff. But the main thing is just getting the pickups height, dialed in as close as I can and just get a really fair comparison.
Nice.
That's nice.
Tony Baloney.
Well, let's see. I was going to talk about one thing, but our friends at the post office decided to put a kibosh on that. So I'm going to talk about another thing.
Okay.
So I don't know, probably seems like 30 or 40 episodes ago we talked about, seems like just yesterday.
Yes.
I purchased a Rickenbacker 850 inspired build from a guy, and I did a little research on it at the time. And this one had like a 4A maple neck, really kind of a really cool instrument. And I got it in. It came with some shipping damage, which is unfortunate. But the same guy had the other guitar that this company made that based on this same thing. And I did a little more research on it and got in touch with the company, which is now called the Green Guitar Project. They're based in Nashville. And the second guitar, which I purchased from the same guy, who now has learned how to pack things very well. So kudos to him. It arrived safe and sound. But the concept behind the Green Guitar Project is basically it's dumpster dive materials. So while
don't give the whole episode away.
I'm not going to give the whole episode away, but I'm giving you the elevator ride.
And there's the green episode.
So while the first one that I purchased was made with like premium wood, I mean, like I said, it had a 4A maple neck, really kind of a cool thing. This one I think is cooler because it has a masonite top and back. Mm-hmm. The neck is made from Baltic birch plywood going straight up and down. Mm-hmm. The sides, it's very kind of Dan Electro-ish, but it's the same body shape. So it's the construction method is basically plywood rims, masonite top and back, and then this one actually does have a set neck that goes into it. I think what I like most about it is it has it's a single pickup guitar, mm-hmm. and it has a wraparound bridge tailpiece,
mm-hmm.
all in one,
and, like an old Junior.
Yeah, basically like a Junior.
Yeah, big fan of that setup.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, this one has a Gibson Dirty Fingers pickup in it, which mm-hmm. I normally don't like, but in this guitar,
why don't you like that pickup?
It's usually too hot and too bright.
Too bright.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But in this one, it seems to work really well. So I'm pretty happy with that. So, long story short, I got in touch with his name is Sean Padden, and he runs the Green Guitar Project in Nashville. We're going to try to get him on board as a guest.
I like that.
And he just really makes some very cool things out of found materials.
Right.
And I think it's a great idea to reuse, recycle, and all that. And this is, it's a beautiful guitar. Mm-hmm. So
Excellent. Well, that's fun.
So that's what I did. So I put new knobs on it today.
Well, yeah, naturally.
Naturally.
That's what I would do.
If you get a guitar from somewhere and you're used to, customizing it yourself, if the only thing you're changing is the knobs, you pretty much hit a home run.
Yeah, so you're doing pretty good there.
Yep.
I mean, I guess so. Anyways.
What about you? Took the fun out of it when it's right.
Well, first of all, something that happened to me this week is that, gentlemen, we hit 150,000 downloads.
Whoa.
Holy
That's a bunch.
It seems like just yesterday we hit 100.
And just the yesterday before that, it was just like, I remember calling all my friends up. I'm like, we got 100 downloads.
I know.
I was freaking out. And I'm still freaking out. Like every time somebody raises their hand and says, "Hey, I like your show," like I freak out. It means a lot to me. Like, we all put a lot into the show. And so for that to hit, I was
That's
super
incredible.
happy. I was really, really excited. So thank all of you for listening to the show.
When are we going to break 1 million?
Oh boy, I don't know. 12.
So, yeah.
So anyways, what I did this week was our friend Drew Foppy from Popstar Amps
That is clean.
hooked me up with his Royal preamp pedal, and it is just a lovely sounding preamp in a box. I guess it's kind of like a EP booster, but it's got way more ness to it.
Okay.
If you go, it's a single knob. If you go all the way, and it's got a fantastic potentiometer on it, and it's got a LED under the foot switch, which is really cool.
That's a big honkin' foot switch.
It's a big foot switch,
For
and
me.
everything's big on this pedal.
Is there a
And
DC?
the guts are really interesting.
Oh, okay,
over
it's
here.
on that side.
So we were talking, and so I'm this is on my board now, and it just like made it more vivid.
Well, I think it's because it's green.
Yeah, I gotta
Maybe.
say I'm a big fan of the color.
Yeah,
I love that color.
He does.
Well, I
love
can't
that
wait
color.
to take this home and try it.
Well, I'm just really excited. That I'm able to have one of these. He makes them in very, very small batches, so it's not quite a something out there that everybody can get their hands on. And I was really
looks like I
honored
got one
and
right
thrilled
now.
to have that. Anyway, so that made it to the board, and I'm very excited. It added quite a bit of extra-ness to my sound. So much thanks to Drew for doing that. And we're going to try to get him back on the show as well to talk about a lot of exciting things. That's it for me. That's it for we. Let's get on with this. 1, 2, 3. 4 on the floor. Sean Arbow from Gunstreet Wiring. Tell us your 4 on the floor.
So my first one is going to be my very first pedal I ever got when I was like 14, which is going to be the Jimi Hendrix wah. And then the way I use it, I don't use it in the traditional sense. I got over that kind of the niche of the Jimi Hendrix playing, Voodoo Child. Or when I was a kid, I loved The Doors, so I played Peace Frog, just like G chord, and then you palm mute it. But I discovered that I prefer it more as a filter. And I would basically play it either all the way up where it's really like that bright, almost ice pick sound, or 3/4 of the way down where it's not completely tone free, but it has that nice kind of it's got a nice little bass to it. And this is also the same pedal that kind of got me into weird, exotic wiring harnesses. My second one is going to be the free pedal I got, which is going to be the DoD American Metal. This is described as a distortion pedal, and I got it from my uncle who told me it was a distortion pedal. But if you were actually to plug it in, which I don't know if this thing's destroyed. My uncle bought it brand new in probably like the 80s, and by the time I got it, it was probably, it's old, but it's sounds more like a fuzz. I would classify it as more like a low end fuzz. It has 3 controls, like level, presence, and distortion. But growing up, not understanding what I was really looking for, I as a kid played a lot of White Stripes, and I always wanted that big muff sound without knowing that's what I wanted. That was my go-to. And they're really affordable nowadays, and it's kind of a fun one if you find it used.
Is that one of the old DoDs that have the enormous plug in the back
Yes.
with
yes.
with direct out to AC.
Yeah. It was that was like also one of my very first pedal mods. I want to get into more pedal modding just for my own. But I did mod that, so it didn't have to use that because that was just that was ridiculous.
Yeah,
whoever came up with that idea and said this would be really cool.
Well, nobody was like linking all kinds of pedals together back then.
but still, I mean, come on.
DoD did some weird stuff back then.
Yeah,
everybody had adapters.
I used to have the famed baby blue DoD delay that had the giant plug in the back, and once I started putting a board together, I had that for years, like 20 years or so, and I'm like, I gotta sell this because I can't use it.
Yeah.
So, well, what are you gonna do? Cool. What's number 3?
All right, so these are the next two are going to be ones I kind of lost over, and I'm going to eventually be buying here soon. Which is going to be number 3 is going to be the Cherry Box by Lollygager.
Oh man,
which Sean has been on the episode, and Sean's an awesome dude, and he lets me harass him about comments about electronics. But I love that Cherry Box. One of the key things that I love about it is the oscillation and how it really can sound like a vintage Nintendo's video game, like the 8-bit sound.
Mm-hmm.
And then you add the fuzz to that, and it's just that's just such a cool sounding. I'm probably going to bug Sean here a little bit later when I get some free cash and get one of those sweet boxes.
Those are really amazing because it's also like Sean, for those who are not aware of Lollygager, Sean is just a super good dude, a very, very involved in the guitar community, and he's up in Michigan just making pedals one at a time, and he does these handmade wood boxes that are hand stained, and he comes up with his own circuits and everything, and it's his flagship pedal, the one that he's made a lot of news on, the Canalia. It's as close to plugging your guitar into an actual like Top Fuel dragster as you can imagine. So go check that out. And yeah, thanks Sean for doing your thing, buddy. But what's number 4?
All right, number 4 is going to be the Pelotar by Pelican Noiseworks. He's a fellow Oregonian, and he did just a brilliant job with that whole pedal, making the pedal itself look like a vintage Klon, but it's just really smart in how he did it with it's basically 2 fuzzes in one, and you have like the traditional gain, treble, and output knobs, but what he did with like the gain is you get to blend between the 2 fuzzes, and then the treble, which I think this is just from doing wiring, even though I know very little about pedals. I thought that was a really brilliant part where with the treble, basically he has it so if you, depending on which side you are on the gain, so which fuzz, if you add more treble to one of the fuzzes, it adds more bass to the other one. So I just thought that's interesting. That's really such a simple, cool idea of how he did that, and I mean, I love the sound of it. You can get that really either that classical like big muff sound, or even kind of all the alternatives to something kind of uniquely yourself.
That pedal has been it just keeps popping up. It's like, especially like on Instagram, it just, a lot of pedals kind of make their way and then they just kind of drift off into oblivion, but that one always makes its way to our attention. So at some point I want to get myself to play one of those, so that's the sad thing. Pelican Noiseworks. So that's 4. That's good, man. Solid little pedal board there, I'd say.
Nice.
We are going to move on to the meat of the show, the interview part of the show. So we've got Sean Arbow from Gunstreet Wiring. So if you are not familiar, take a little trip over to gunstreetwiring.com on the internet and over on the Instagrams, and check out what the brand is making. Them
those guys.
Me, my wife, and my little brother-in-law.
Yeah. I'm always really interested in the things that aren't necessarily at the forefront. You know, we talk a lot about pedals, we talk a lot about amps, we talk a lot about guitars and stuff, but the things that make some of those things happen.
Yeah, it's kind of
so just like
behind the
boards
scenes, under the cover,
and wiring and all that business.
You don't see that
right.
stuff, but it makes a difference.
Huge difference. It makes a big difference. It makes a huge and big difference.
If you have a Dan
both
Armstrong,
right.
you could see.
Yeah, or if you have a clear pick guard.
Right. So one of the ways that I was able to connect with Sean, if you heard the second to the last show that we just did, I've talked about installing that harness into a Telecaster for a friend's guitar that I was working on in a band, and it was really cool. We had a nice little conversation over the internet, and we said, let's get you on the show, man. And he speedily sent something out for us to check out, and I was really appreciative of that. So thank you for that, Sean.
Of course.
And it was for quality stuff. There's a lot of that you'll probably see on the internet about, it's great packaging and got the great product and all that stuff. And it's true. It was a solid thing that you delivered. So tell us a little bit about, first and foremost, wait a minute, I have a question for you.
Uh-huh.
If you go to your site, it says, we don't want to be just another dated wiring company. Woohoo. It's fighting words there. What?
Here comes all caps.
Talk about that.
It even comes down to like the name of Gunstreet. Gunstreet was a parable that my grandpa used to tell about just doing your own thing and using a lot of your own influences to create your own uniqueness. At the state of the market right now, there's a lot of, a lot of people learn from forums. There's a lot of like kind of weirdness that comes out and
No.
And even Jaron was making the joke that was like, there's a lot of mojo. My goal with Gunstreet is to stay out of that. My quality is beyond the parts. That's my unofficial motto, is quality beyond the parts. So I'm not going to tell you whatever you want to build. If you want to do it for your $99 Squire or your, $5,000 Eric Johnson Strat, I will work with you to do whatever you want as an individual customer. And I'm going to keep out of my own opinion. I'll answer questions you may have, but I'm not going to put my own what is good and what is not good. Because in the end, as you probably all have started to realize, is it so subjective? I've got, and as I've progressed with Gunstreet and in the wiring side of Gunstreet, I've really started to realize how subjective things are, to the point where I don't care about parts. I just want to make the best possible product I can, no matter what I use.
Sold. All right. Well, that's the show, everybody.
Join us next week.
No, man, that's solid. I appreciate anybody with a point of view, even if I don't agree with it. And I think that's great. I think that's cool that you have something that you can stand behind that motivates you. Fantastic.
Well, thank you.
So tell us about how you got this whole thing started. What prompted you to dig deep into the world of wiring?
So growing up, I was a wannabe guitar builder. I built a guitar for myself just out of, my parents couldn't afford a really nice American made guitar, but I always wanted one. So I was like, screw it, I'll make my own. So then I ended up making this Les Paul Jr. that kind of, I had an uncle who basically played it and he was just floored with it. So I had that idea of that's what I wanted to be, is a guitar builder. I try my hardest to build guitars. I don't think I have enough patience to make them super, super perfect. I get them to the point where I love them. Mm-hmm. But then I started doing that, and then it got into kind of the weirdness. Or I also had some negative experiences. I'm very cautious as a person, especially when you're doing something like you don't know. So I bought some wiring harnesses off of eBay, and I just had a negative experience with that. And then I tried a bunch of other places and still had that, being a noob, it was really hard to get a lot of information and a lot of help when you needed it. Mm-hmm. So I ended up just being all right, I'm going to dive in as much as I can. I learned as much as I could through forums, which can be good, can be bad. So I learned everything I could. And then I kind of just like that wah. I'll give you an example of the wah. Is I've always been someone who's searching for a sound. Like all of us are searching for that one sound that we really love, and just kind of doing more of just like I started with a 50s modern volume bleed and all the subtleties. I was like, okay, I want something else. So I did the Jimmy Page wiring, and that was fun. And then it was close, but it didn't do what I wanted. So then that's when I got into more just modding and doing it for fun. Even if Gunstreet stops, I'd still be building wiring harnesses just because I love it. I recently have been forcing myself, because I work so much with this job, and I recently went back to working part-time at my old job, super part-time. So I've been trying to force myself to get back into breadboarding and just creating circuits, because it's really fun to.
Don't you find it kind of therapeutic to solder
absolutely.
stuff? I mean, I find myself sometimes I'll get in the middle of something and I look up at the clock and it's like 3 hours later.
Yeah, it's really neat. I like doing that. The only thing I don't like doing is soldering pots. I hate that.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm not, because I don't.
You end up with a mountain of
He's
solder.
a globber.
Well, he ends up with a mountain.
I have a pin tip soldering iron for making little pedal stuff. So when I have to do it, then I just end up not doing it.
You need
as
a different
awesome of a
tip
job
for
as
a different soldering.
It's true.
jobs.
I need to get one. That's it. I just don't. I haven't. So, anyways.
And then I think another thing that really kind of Gunstreet is very unique in the sense of I for my previous job, I wasn't with Gunstreet. I've never been really about the money, and with my previous job, I got paid a lot, but it was really never satisfying for me. I tend to be very like a artistic person, and that's why if you see my packaging, there's a ton of subtle details that it's slowly changed. I mean, I've already changed it like 2 times since I sent you that harness, and that was not that long ago. So it turned into this one thing of like, it was an artistic release. So it just slowly, I got obsessed with wiring guitars and the cool kind of things that you could do with just, series parallel, out of phase, and all the subtle mods associated with that. But then it got into the point where it's like, I really enjoyed making the website. I really enjoyed making the package.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed making the how-to instructions. It just kind of turned into a business accidentally. I actually originally didn't want to do wiring harnesses and originally wanted to do a vintage guitar store.
We never hear that on this show.
No, exactly. Right. And then it just turned into, I just always did that. And I always helped out customers and really listened to people. And then it turned into all of a sudden now I'm Sean Arbow of Gunstreet Wiring Shop, and I'm known for wiring harnesses.
Yes.
I would be glad that you're doing what you're doing now. I mean, the brick and mortar guitar stores are really tough to do right now.
Absolutely.
Especially in the vintage market. As crazy as that's going.
Well, I mean, I don't know if Oregon is a uniqueness, but I mean, I would be one of many vintage guitar stores, like just even the Pacific Northwest. Mm-hmm. You're like Thunder Road. Mm-hmm. Which has one in Portland and in, I believe, Seattle. Mike and Mike's Bar Grill or Guitar Bar.
Yep.
Phenomenal. It's, even though I did that, and I have my own way I wanted to do it, which I probably will use for just kind of my own hobby, which is different than how they would do it. But I don't know if I could ever, like you said, brick and mortar is very hard.
Totes, man.
When
I need some street cred really quick right there. One of the interesting things about wiring is that it is sort of, I reference the black magic categories a lot. There are certain things that fall into, black magic as far as guitar things go. And what I mean by that is simply that there are things that are not necessarily fully understood by people who aren't familiar with electronics. So it's like, why does wiring matter? Like, it's wires, it's pots, it's stuff. Like, why is there really that big of a difference?
There is.
Well, I'm sure Tony says there is, and
absolutely.
I bet Sean's going to tell us that
is
there is
Zach?
too.
Is there a difference?
Yeah, there's a big difference.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of those differences real quick. Could you go into that a little bit?
Well, the easiest way, and I always get this question asked a lot, like, why really would I want to change my wiring? And the easiest way to say is like the pickups are the engine. And I'm sorry, Jared, if I offend you, because this is just how I sell it, is the pickups are the engine, where the wiring harness is like the transmission and the gearing. So it's like you have that raw kind of power of the pickup, but then it gets put through the wiring harness like almost like a filter. And depending on how you wire that up, it's going to filter it very subtly different. Whether you use high-end pots or cheap pots, it doesn't matter as long as the value is correct. But there's the subtleties of like, okay, you have to wire those pickups either in series or parallel, or out of phase. There's a huge wiring is. I'm always surprised on how much people don't realize there's options out there. Mm-hmm. And then I guess that's also what I'm trying to do with Gunstreet is give there is more than your 50s modern and volume bleed.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. That was a really good analogy. I couldn't agree.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of one of the things that we hope to do on this show is dispel some of those misunderstandings or shed light on things that we should be understanding of. The first thing that typically comes up when you're talking about a wiring harness is pots.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And just really quickly, for those who don't know what pots are,
Potentiometer?
potentiometers.
Yeah.
It's the
A
thing,
variable resistor.
It's the thing that the little knob on your guitar is connected to underneath your wiring.
It's holding the knobs.
Yeah, its primary function
knob holder.
is a knob holder.
It's a knob holder.
So yeah, with that you have, there's wide option with potentiometers, whether down from value to whether it's a audio, or most easiest said is audio, or a linear pot. Every little subtle action has a big difference. I take my products like very serious. Like I'm not a perfect person. I'm human, so I'm subjective to error. Like especially when it's me making these harnesses and I'm doing it 12 hours a day on certain days, even when I'm sick. So it's like stuff happens, but then you have the people who's like, oh, your products are crap. It's everything.
People saying that?
Well, of course, because what happens is you're building up this idea of when companies
Just
sell
for the
you
record, they're not everybody.
Not everyone. I get
We heard it right from his mouth. He said his products are crap.
Every single customer. No, and I get a lot of phenomenal. Like I'm very serious about my products. So I take them to heart when they do that. And there's a lot of times where I'm like,
Sure.
People who I look up to and are like, wow, that's really impressive. Sean, I sent a harness to Sean Wright, and like he is what he does for a living is professional, soldering, and I'm this amateur who just kind of did it for fun, and he's like, wow, that's a really nice product, and all this kind of stuff. But you get the idea where people don't understand it, and they're expecting it to be like this cure-all of things. So it's like, oh, this is crap because it didn't make this sound, and when I try to do the tone control, it was basically on or off, which has nothing to do with the actual pot or the quality of the harness, but it's all the subtleties of like, okay, if it's a linear pot, it's not going to, if you think what a linear pot is the easiest way to describe it is a consistent taper. So it's, if you had like a box and on one side you have 1 to 10 and the other one it's from 1 to 10 on there like that, it goes from 10 to 1 very consistently down, and there's no weirdness.
Okay.
And then you have something like an audio. It's smooth.
Smooth jazz.
Well, subjective. And then you have something that's like an audio pot, which is it's designed to mimic how the ear hears. Because that's another thing is we all hear things differently, and we all hear frequencies differently. So certain people prefer.
So is that like would you maybe say that an audio pot is more like exponentially growing?
It's logarithmic.
Logarithm, yeah, exactly.
So
kind of curvy up. So if you start down here at 1, it can get, and then go up to turn it up to 10. There's a gentle curve,
right? It's
and
not
generally
just
speaking,
a diagonal.
Until you get to about 7 or 8, you don't really hear a vast increase in volume.
Gotcha. All right.
Whereas with the a linear, it's basically 1 is 1.
Okay.
1/10. 5 is half.
Right.
So,
yeah.
So I mean, not all.
3 is half, if I remember.
Yeah, you're
off the top
right.
of my head, like 3 on audio is half, and compared to 5 on linear is half.
Oh boy. So can I ask a quick question about those real? Are there brands that would specifically? This is something I don't know. I'm asking like a person who doesn't know because I don't know. Like, are all Gibsons linear and all Fenders audio, or does that?
It depends on the year, and
okay.
And that's the crazy thing is, so I'm someone who I love to take things apart and look at it. So I've bought multiple of the same instruments. So we were doing like a photo shoot for the website, and then I went to the Tacoma Guitar Festival and I sold that guitar. And then I was like, oh, well, I still need to use that guitar. So I bought another one of the exact same one. It was the orange. It's an orange Squire.
Good man.
And yeah, exactly. So the first one used 24 millimeter, which is what you call full size pot. And they were both linear. And then the second one I have, which used mini pots, and one was linear. The volume was linear and the tone was audio. And you'll see that happen more and more with different companies. They'll switch it around. It's never consistent, because what happens is everyone has their interpretation of what is better than the other. And it's so subjective that it really doesn't matter in the end. So
I think it's actually more of what box gets pulled off the shelf that week.
What does the supplier have in stock? And what can we get away with?
That's weird. Why wouldn't that be controlled? I mean, it's electronic.
Whatever they can get their hands on.
Yeah, I mean, basically.
Yeah. We need to, ship out 500 guitars next month, and they don't have enough pots. Well, what's close to that?
They
That'll
need to
work.
fire the parts.
Well, I mean, it happened.
Guy.
It happened back in the 50s and 60s with.
Well,
Fender.
I know Leo,
Yeah.
like the whole, the story of
You'll
like,
find 1 meg pots and 60s Fender Telecasters. 1 meg pots.
Ouch.
I had a 1970 that had a 1 meg pot.
Yeah, crazy.
Gibson used to buy like military surplus stuff back then. I mean, it's just whatever they could get their hands on.
Right. So, I mean, I guess before we're throwing out a lot of numbers and different things here, can we kind of go, I guess, what is the general guideline for types of pickup and what are the cookbook values of pots and caps and different things like that?
like a mini 101.
Yeah.
So generally what they do is we'll do like something like a Jazzmaster pickup uses a 1 meg pot. Something like a humbucker uses a 500K pot, and something like a single coil uses a 250K pot. That is the kind of the status quo. That's what they tell you. Now, then you get into it. It's all, you can do whatever you want. The reason they use that is the pot value acts as a limiter, if that's the easiest way to say it. So the higher the value, the more comes through. The lower the value, usually the top end gets cut off. So the reason you'd want to do that on like a single coil for a 250K, you'd want to do it on a single coil because it cuts out some of the high frequencies.
Right. So if you have a Telecaster pickup and it sounds literally like an ice pick, you may have a 500K pot.
Or you may have a 1 meg.
Okay.
And yeah, if you don't like that, then you probably want to switch it.
Right.
But I've also seen the opposite side where it's like someone's like, I don't like the sound of this.
Sure. It's all subjective at that point.
Absolutely. Here's a prime example. The number one reason why you would want to switch a Gibson harness out is not because of the quality of the parts. That's a misconception, but it's because they use 300K pots nowadays. Mm-hmm. Gibson traditionally uses 500K. Mm-hmm. And then they had, if I remember correctly, they had a lot of complaints that it was too hot. It sounded too people asked for those vintage, really high output style pickups. And then they're like, nope, don't like it. So Gibson ended up just like, all right, we'll cut the value to 300K. Mm. And so you can get in the easiest way to kind of breathe life into it without doing the pickups is just going to a traditional 500K.
Gotcha. So if your Gibson or Gibson style guitar with humbuckers sounds a little dead or a little kind of
muffled
or something,
it's definitely muffled.
You may have 300 or probably more likely 250K pots in there for some reason.
300K.
Yes.
300.
Yeah.
That's pretty common.
They
now.
even did that in the mid to late 70s.
Well, if
too.
someone made a mod or something.
Yeah, they've been doing it for a long time.
So so we know the values
Like
on pots. What is your take on the mini pot versus a full size pot?
See, that's I'm someone like back in the day, I'd be like, oh, mini pots suck because they're so much smaller and there's not enough, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But realistically, I'm like, we live in the modern era of technology and like manufacturing. And if you look at manufacturing in the last 20 years, we've produced more electronics than we have in the past, probably 200 years. Sure. So as long as a brand can consistently do the corrective value. So it's like, just because it's labeled 500K doesn't mean it's going to be 500K. There's going to be a variance of, I think the market standard is 10%?
10 or 15. Yeah.
10 or 15. So it's like your 500K pot could be either anywhere between 450 to 550. So as long as they can do that, I don't have a problem with it.
Bourne's actually, don't they make some nice mini pots?
Yeah, Bourne's
Yes.
does, yeah.
Oh yeah.
I
Is there an advantage to that, having a mini pot versus a regular size pot?
Less
size.
corrosion.
The electricity doesn't have to go as far.
Less corrosion.
putting it in a hollow body.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
definitely. Yep.
That's the number one reason I will use a mini pot is a hollow body and putting it through the F hole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The push-pull mini Bournes, that I am a big fan of those myself.
That's what I have in my SG right now.
Yeah.
So there are probably some people who have been slightly exposed to pots and pot names and stuff, right? So can you list off just a couple, and just so that we all know what, like, oh, okay, so when we hear that, we're like, yep, yeah, I know what that is now.
So the top four that I generally use is going to be Burns, because my personal favorite, which is it's solely subjective, is the Burns, because they have a very low torque shaft, so it's really easy to spin.
Low
CTS,
torque shaft.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
CTS, which is going to be your American market standard, and then CTS, anyone can go buy CTS bots for their own, and they can do whatever spec. So you'll have a lot of like companies who are like, oh well, we have a certain set version, but it's still a CTS brand. The third one I would say is Alpha. Most people use Alpha. And then a lot of the higher end metric pots, which is American pots, use a shaft that is 3/8 diameter, where the metric pot. So if you buy any guitar not from America, it's going to use a metric system style shaft, which is I think it's like 7.63 millimeter. But I use it's JSE, and they're actually a really nice quality brand.
Interesting. Yeah, that is one of the more confusing things, and I found myself sitting there with a Fender Telecaster wiring harness that was literally falling apart, trying to measure out. Like, okay, wait, is that 3/8? I can hardly just like.
See, all you have to do is pick up the phone.
Well, yeah, but I couldn't. It was very late.
Okay.
Yeah, I answer emails really late.
Yeah, so he's like, "Don't worry about it. I got you. I'll give you the right stuff." And I said, "I'm pretty sure it's a 3/8." So, and then
if not, the solution is a wonderful tool called a unibit, which is kind of a stepped bit that goes from about 1/8 to 1/2, and it drills through. It's primarily designed for metal, but I use
like that.
yeah.
That woke me up.
Yeah, just like that. but I use it a lot. I use it on pick guards because I just to double check the size of the holes that I drill, and I also use it for installation of like end pin jacks or tuning machines.
Okay.
Just to open up the holes a little bit. So if you do have one of the smaller metric size holes and you want to put 3/8 shaft pots, you can open them up with a unibit.
You can use like a
that or a reamer.
Yeah.
All the little tools, jack pots and taper rammers and all that stuff.
The unibit's faster.
Probably.
And I'm all about fast.
Okay, so we got some pots names out there. So everybody might have looked at the bottom and it says Alpha, it says CTS, it says Burns, it says so that's good. We got that covered off. That's cool. If you go down the rabbit hole of like orange drop versus paper and oil on the internet, beware.
Oh, no.
So let's talk about the little funky bits in between the pots.
The capacitors, and capacitor is what creates the tone. this is usually if I get the most hate mail, it's associated to this. So I'm going to be very cautious about this. Again, associated with electronics, you're really looking for the value. What it's made from generally doesn't have a huge difference. The quality of the manufacturing has a huge difference, but like whether it's the term, you'll hear it, paper and oil, or the people who don't like it, it's paper and snake oil, referencing that.
Sure.
But what you're really looking for is something that is very accurate when you measure it. So vintage pots, which a lot of people are looking for that vintage sound, it's a very slippery slope.
You mean capacitors?
They're capacitors, yes.
Yeah.
Because what happens is like, okay, vintage, the quality of manufacturing nowadays is like we were talking about earlier, it's just phenomenal. And you can have a really nice quality capacitor for relatively cheap. But back in the day, the higher quality ones had if I remember this, it's like, so a vintage capacitor is negative variance of the accuracy of the measurement. It's negative 10%, positive 80%.
Okay.
Because the reason is you don't want a capacitor that is lower than it should be, but you can fix a capacitor that is over what it should be.
Okay. So really quick for all of us whose eyes just crossed a little bit. First of all, let's identify what the capacitor is. The capacitor is the thing in your wiring harness that typically has two little wires coming out that are straddling in between some other electronic bits, usually made out of some sort of material that isn't metal.
Mylar, paper with a certain oil
Ceramic.
in it.
It might look orange. It might look like a disc. It might look like there's the bumblebees.
Gibson has those little tiny microscopic ones.
Yeah, there's all kinds. So let's identify. So a capacitor is doing what?
It's basically the simplest way to do it is it's filtering the audio, and as you turn down the tone control, it grounds out certain frequencies. Depending on the capacitor, it'll ground out if you have like a certain value, it'll ground out a certain frequency. So as you turn down your control, it grounds out more and more tones or frequency. On my website, I did.
So we're saying ground out. That just means you're shaving it off.
Pretty much, it literally puts the frequency to the pot casing.
Okay.
On my website, if you guys want to see more, I did a blog about this, like right in the very beginning of Gunstreet.
Oh, great.
About how capacitors work, and I worked with my buddy to make some fun GIFs so people can see it a little differently.
Excellent.
Yeah, and then again, the value is what really does it. And depending on the value and how accurate, the taper will be different, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So if you have one that's like, okay, does say it's labeled as 0.022, which is traditional for a humbucker. But if you actually measured it, it's at like, 0.047. So it's going to have a different taper than one that would be the correct value.
I think that's why a lot of people think that the vintage bumblebees or whatever sound different, is just because the tolerances back then were so loose that, most of the time it's not going to be a 0.022.
No.
And it drifts over time as well. And I think that could be where they're hearing some of the differences.
Which it does. I mean, it does make a difference. What it's made from doesn't make a difference, but the tolerance is going to be what it does. Yeah. And then it's like you use the reference of orange drops. Their tolerances are very, very high. Like
very consistent.
Yeah, I made a matched harness, which implies that, okay, you have pickups. They're not perfectly matched. What? No, Jared, what is the general? Is it 10, 20% difference?
It depends what kind of guitar it is. And it depends what you're trying to do.
Yeah, well, but you have a difference in the neck and the bridge. So
generally you should. I mean, some of the old vintage stuff you don't. They didn't pay attention to that back in the day.
Yeah, probably not.
No.
But a lot of people want the matched harnesses. Like I get asked a lot to do a matched harness, and what they really ask for is like they want all. So if it's a Les Paul, they want all 4 control knobs to be 500K exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. Which.
Yeah.
Doesn't, if you're going to match a harness, you match it to the pickups.
That's
so
right.
say there's a 20% difference.
There's a 20% difference.
And there's a 20% difference. So you want to have like the bridge pickup is the hotter one. So you want to have that the two volume and tone controls to be 20% lower than the neck tone. So I had a fun time doing this with an SG harness, and I figured out the variance and I did that. But I had to measure probably like 150. I love doing it because I'm like a nerd about this, but I hate doing it from like, in a business sense, I just lost a ton of money doing this. But I had to measure easily like 100 of the orange drops because they were so consistent that I couldn't find one that was a big enough variance that I could actually do it properly. The pots were easy, but the orange drop capacitors were a little more difficult. Yeah. If I was using a vintage, I probably could find that a little bit easier. But the high qualityness of orange drops are phenomenal.
I watched a video that took way too much time out of my life. And it was a guy that was literally he compared paper and oil, a orange drop, and a bumblebee with like a massive spectrometer thing. I mean, I watched it and I was like, well, okay.
But I think that's part of the whole guitar game.
We just opened up this pedal and we geeked out on like, that thing looks cool.
When I was eating my corn chowder, Zach told me that what the difference is basically the value of the capacitor.
But
I also have a funny story.
What is that have to do with corn chowder?
I said while I was eating my corn chowder, Zach told me the value.
So we're talking about how, like you get into that kind of that mojo side. Another thing that a lot of people claim is the voltage and how voltage even adds more to the spectrum. And what voltage is. So capacitors are rated for a certain amount of voltages, depending on what you're putting in and what you want from it. It's got to hold a certain amount of heat, essentially. And so when I originally started my harnesses, I did it just like a normal guitar wiring does maybe a volt, like maybe not even close. And then I started out with that, but I started getting people email me about my product because I always like feedback if you want to give me feedback. And people are like, I'm really let down by these orange drop capacitors because when you read about it on forums and they call them orange drop, people think candy. And I was like, okay, that's funny. But I kept getting them. Like I kept getting message after message. So I'm like, okay, so I'll add the voltage up. So originally started out with whatever the plain Jane orange drop is voltage to 100 volts. And then I still kept getting them. And then I went up to 300. And then I got it to what I am now, which is 600 volt, which is the exact same size as a hard candy.
Wow, but it looks cool.
It looks cool because that's what people want.
How do they taste?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Grandma's hard candy.
Yeah, I was in Tacoma Guitar Festival and doing an expo, and Paul Reed Smith was there, and he went and saw my products, and he was like, first thing he does is he's trolling me and be like, why are you using this voltage? And I was like, because it looks like candy, and he chuckled and said, that's the right answer.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Paul Reed Smith is trolling.
Yeah.
People just get a warm, fuzzy feeling inside when they open up a Les Paul and they got those stripes on the caps,
Yeah, it's just kind of
neat. They probably have a ceramic cap buried in a hunk of plastic.
Allegedly.
It's got to look right. It's got to look right, darn it.
Hey, they paid $5,000 for that guitar.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so we talked about, did we talk about values on the caps yet? I mean, in general, we talked about values on the pots. But you said like 22s for humbuckers.
The general standard is humbuckers are 22. Single coils are going to be 0.47 UF. And then even traditional Fender, you can find them anywhere from 0.1 to what they generally are, which is the 0.47.
And in an effort to, just real quick, Tony, in an effort to make sure that we don't actually make people crash their cars from all this math and learning. I want to throw out something. This has helped me. I've gone back to it many times because for some reason I have a harder time retaining some of these things. But it really did help me understand things. There is a YouTube channel by a guy named BigClive.com. That's Big Clive, DOTCOM. And he is this huge guy. He's a Scotsman, and he's got this great red beard, and he talks in the most gentlest, like, it's crazy. It's this huge guy. He's like,
well, first you take the thing and then you put it in the it's fantastic. Anyways, he fixes things. This is what, like, he does electronics at the vault for his career, which he also shares. But there is a specific video called A Simple Guide to Electronic Components. And I'm telling you, everybody, if you go watch that, I promise you, you will understand everything that we're talking about. At least at the moment. You may forget it, but you can always go back to it.
Case in point.
It is a layman's understanding. He literally draws everything out with like a Sharpie, and it's fantastic. I highly encourage that. Big Clive, DOTCOM, bigclive.com.
He's the
on
Bob
YouTube.
Ross of wiring.
He really is. Like, for real. That's legit.
There goes my goals.
Yeah.
All right, so we talked pots.
Yeah.
We talked caps.
Yep.
How about that stuff that goes in between? I think it's called wiring.
The actual wire, or you want to talk about the way the circuit works?
The actual wire.
The wire.
Well, that one is Mojo. Is
No.
people claim cloth is better than PVC. And from what I understand, they're no different. I prefer using cloth only for like a manufacturing side, where it's a lot easier to push the cloth back than it is to actually cut the wire consistently. Again, that's more Mojo. Braided wire, I do like braided wire, and I use a lot of braided wire on mine because it's just, again, Mojo, and I actually like the way it looks. Is I do create with the braided wire Faraday cages for the wires. It doesn't.
When you're talking about braided wire, are you talking about braided internal wire within the PVC, or braided wires?
So what the braided wire is it's your normal cloth wire, and then it has a metal 2-strand braided rope-esque cover around it. Mm-hmm. And then that's what traditionally used as a ground. Mm-hmm. But what you can do is, so there's this thing called Faraday cage, and basically you defends against all the radio frequencies that can hit it. So it blocks those away. So it's, in theory, less noisy.
Oh, interesting.
You do it correctly.
Sure.
Well, I just want to make that distinction because I know if you are looking at, especially pedals, people like to get fancy with the pedal builds, and they will take 2 wires that need to go somewhere, and they will actually braid them. So like you can have a yellow wire and a purple wire, and they'll braid them so they look nice and they stay together. That is not what we're talking about.
No. That helps the flow of electricity. But this is just, this is the traditional, back in the day, that's how they would have done. Like, you would have bought a lamp like that, and you would have that kind of braided wire. And it's what you find on most Gibson guitars and even vintage, like cheap harmonies have their own version of it.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And are you using like bus wire for a common ground on?
Yes, I have
bus wire, Tony.
Bus wire is a solid chunk of metal. Essentially, it can
copper.
be made copper. Usually, what I use is copper tinned with a silver. Mm-hmm. And I use just like a nice thin version because I can mold it really easily. Mm-hmm. But that is usually what I use for like a Les Paul version.
You don't use solid gold then?
I tried only on my own.
Yeah,
gold is very hard to solder. I don't know if you've tried that.
Yeah.
What? No.
The heat, but
Interesting. So okay, so we talked about the actual components and such. Now, obviously, there are many different ways. It's almost to the point where it's like, if you are familiar with In-N-Out burgers, basically the hidden menu, In-N-Out burgers has like, you can get a hamburger, you can get a cheeseburger, you can get a double of each, right? Whatever. But there's a whole other hidden menu. It's like, I wanted animal style, and that's with grilled onions and mustard mixed all together. There's all kinds of different things,
Wow, we're gonna have to go to In-N-Out.
No, it's not. It's all right. It's pretty good. But anyways, what my point is that there's all kinds of little different ways and things that you can do with the actual harness. In fact, we just referenced one in that episode that I was telling you about 2 episodes back. Once you hear this, that we referenced to like a Nashville Telecaster wiring, which is basically you're flipping the control unit around so that the volume is the first knob in front, right? but you can't just simply flip it around. You have to flip some of the components around within the actual unit, or else everything will be backwards. So all that is to say that there's a lot of literally like unique little ways to do things. What are some of those unique ways to wire things that you do, or that you get asked to do?
So I'm going to start with the way I like to describe them is you have main style wirings, and then you have sub styles. The main styles are like the traditional, what you call like a high pass filter. For Gibson, it'd be like your 50s wiring, which is all about the treble. Modern, which is what is kind of confusing when you say modern, but it's what they've been doing since probably the 60s or 70s. And then you have what you call a volume bleed. And what the volume bleed wiring is basically, it's the modern wiring, but they add a resistor to make it sound like it. I didn't do it. Let me rephrase that. Another fellow friend of the show, Eric Morrow, he did an excellent video about the difference between 50s modern and volume bleed. And he goes really into the difference, because there is a big difference. And a lot of times I'll read reviews of like people when they do it like other wiring harnesses, and they talk about like, oh, this one sucks because the tone control doesn't work and it's basically an on off. And that's usually a sign because they use a 50s wiring, which the way that the 50s works is they basically, instead of using instead of the tone control going through the pickup and then to the output, it goes to the output, and it causes the tone control to work very weirdly in the traditional sense, where the modern was basically brought in because people hated that, and plus I think it associated more of like just as the music progressed. The modern has a more consistent taper both in volume and in tone control. But when you do the volume on the modern, you lose a lot of high end, and people don't like that. So that's when you have the volume bleed, which adds that high end back through that resistor. So that's the main wiring. But then you get into the fun stuff, which I love, is going to be into things like series parallel. And that's usually how you wire the pickups. Series is if you think about like a humbucker, Jared, feel free to you probably explain it just as good. But the two coils of a humbucker, they are wired in series to each other. So the, the North Start?
And your North Start is going to be your hot typically, and your the ends are going to be tied together on a north and south, and then the South Start is going to be your ground. That's typical.
And that's in series.
That's a series, yep.
So what does that mean? Because none of that meant anything to me. What does that actually mean to me?
Each coil is going to work in a series.
Okay.
First, you're going to go this coil.
1, 2,
then
1, 2.
You're adding
right.
them
1,
together.
2, 1, 2.
Yep.
The coil's output is combined, essentially,
That's right.
Gotcha.
Yep.
And then what you can do is you can change that to make it parallel. So you're basically having those coils act separately, but together.
Yeah, simultaneously.
Two single coil pickups on at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Okay, that's a great explanation. Thank you, Tony.
and that will have a little bit difference. Like even if you have that humbucker in series and then you put it in parallel, a lot of times what happens is you get more bass, more mids. It's got its own uniqueness. And then what you can do is have my favorite is out of phase. So it basically, the way I like to describe it is it essentially makes both the pickups. So when you're in middle position and you swap one of them out of phase, it changes the ground to hot and then the original hot to ground. But it ends up causing the pickups to essentially fight each other, and like certain frequencies will come out of it. And you can get really kind of like Peter Green is famous for out of phase.
Oh yeah.
You can get some nice kind of, it's a thinner sound.
Squawky.
Kind of
like
funky,
squawky,
Yeah, but not
squawky.
quite single coil.
Not
Like in between,
Quite,
right?
but quacky like a Strat.
When you adjust your tones on either pickups, if you have that kind of setup, you can really control how much squawk is going on. And
because they have to be
volume,
matched
yeah,
too.
your volumes turn into tones.
So this is super important stuff if you're into punk rock.
Pretty much. That's what I grew up on. And I was like, I want that sound, but I have an SG. How do I achieve that?
Right.
And then you have other things like capacitor filters. So my wah, as an example, I really wanted that really high pitch wah sound, which you can do with a capacitor, and they call it like a bright switch if it's on like a Jazzmaster.
Mm-hmm.
And you can use a 0.003 UF capacitor, and you filter all the output through that, and it filters out everything but the kind of highs, essentially. You can do things like that. And then the fun part, which I love to do and I nerd out about, is combining all those together. So you can have both series parallel, and actually I should also say coil cutting. So what coil cutting is it cuts one of the humbucker's coils. So it's similar to a single coil. I think it sounds more like a P90. I don't know if you guys agree with that. Probably depends on the pickup.
I'll agree with you on that.
Yeah, and it's not quite there. But you can also add that the Jimmy Page harness is like one of the famous ones that a lot of people use for exotic wiring, and that has 2 coil cutting, the series in parallel, and the out of phase. But depending on how you do that, you can really define the sound very uniquely. And then you get into more kind of fun things like modded series and the stuff that I like to do. I have my Tele 5-way kit, which has your normal Telecaster tones from 1 to 3, and then 4 is out of phase, and then number 5 is a series. But I did, like my secret sauce to it, so it gets it that kind of what I'm trying to go for is like a bridge humbucker. And that's one of those things where it's like there's so much you can do with just those subtle combinations.
Like a Nashville Telecaster style.
No.
No. I mean, you can go like a Baja Tele. Baja Tele is another one.
I mean, that's what I got the Nashville Deluxe, and it's a 5-way.
Is that?
So it goes.
Well,
neck.
You're adding a middle.
Yeah,
You're basically making it a Strat, though.
Yeah.
This is different because it takes those 2 pickups.
I don't.
And then it just does a different combination.
Yep, that's all it is. Yep.
Okay. But yeah, that's where I like to have fun. Is just
so the bottom line is, if someone goes to Gunstreet Wiring, there are many, many ways that you can get your wiring kit hooked up. And if you don't see something, can they ask for that?
Absolutely. That was something that kind of I did this for myself, and I always just kind of did my own, and that kind of got thrown into me, and I actually really enjoy doing the custom work. Another competitive podcast, they said that I do custom work, and then all of a sudden,
another podcast.
There's I think there's one, just one.
Okay,
There are lots.
But there are lots. But Ryan was like, oh yeah, they do custom work. So all of a sudden, everyone's like, well, I want this guitar, I want this harness and this harness. So then it was kind of fun because then I love doing this for myself. Yeah. And then people come up with the coolest ideas, even if they don't buy. A lot of times when people are like, yeah, I'll do that, but it's going to cost this amount of money because it takes this amount of hours to do it. Sure. And they're like, oh, I can't afford that. So then you'll get that. And then all of a sudden we're like, but I really want to make that harness. So if you want to come contact me in a custom harness, I will make it. Even if you don't buy it, I'll probably make it for myself.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, holy moly, did we learn an awful lot about wiring and stuff today. And we learned it from somebody who's making a really great product. I put it in a guitar. I really enjoyed working with it. It was very neatly presented, so I really didn't have to figure out a lot. Like, you do most of the work right up front, and the rest is for me to mess up. So I appreciate that you're doing that out there, and I appreciate that you're trying to take a new take on things. And with all the newer guitarists out there, giving people understanding of how these things work. So check out his wares and his knowledge base too. As he said, he shared quite a few things out there. So thank you very much, man.
Thank you.
One of the things that happened this week, I sent out a little Instagram thing for
Would You Rather?
And I got some great responses back. If you haven't seen that, go to our Instagram and watch my little video, and you'll see what this is all about. But I'll tell you what it's about right now, because that'll save you time. If you want to submit your own Would You Rather question to us to have read and attributed on our show, just DM me on Instagram, or you could send me an email at todd@theguitarknobs.com, and we will read your fantastic idea, probably, on our little episode show thing, dilly bobber right now. Jared,
Okay, gentlemen, and it's time for Would You Rather? Thank you, Tony. So, this week's Would You Rather is brought to us by Eli Maisman. Thank you very much, my man. Would you rather gig with a 1959 Les Paul Burst plugged into a Vox amp plug, which is a tiny personal amp that you use with headphones?
That you literally plug into the guitar.
That's right.
Oh yeah,
It's a little thing you take with you on trips and whatnot.
Yeah.
But you're gonna actually plug through that and then plug through a PA system.
Yeah, somehow.
Awesome guitar, tiny little,
Maybe
amp
not
plug.
so awesome amp.
That's right.
Affordable.
Or
An Ashton starter guitar through a Marshall JCM 800 running through a awesome old greenback speaker Marshall 412 cab.
okay,
I mean,
so
just
if you don't know what an Ashton starter guitar, insert any really horrible
Yeah.
kind of starter
First
guitar.
act.
Hondo,
Anything
Squire.
like that. Any of those things. So, well, careful, Tony.
Yeah, you said Squires. Some Squires aren't bad at all.
Yeah.
So
One or two.
So the gist is, Jared,
that's right. The premise is, would you rather have an awesome guitar and a, rinky-dink little whatever, or would you rather have a crappy guitar going through a Supreme amplifier system?
and let's step that up and say legendary guitar
That's right.
and
Legendary
completely
amp.
unlegendary amp and a legendary amp and a completely unlegendary guitar.
That's pretty much it.
Let's hear from Zach.
Yeah, that's tricky for me because I am probably one of the biggest vintage guitar nerds out there. But if in a live situation, I think I would rather prefer to have the better amp just because, it's going to sound terrible through the other thing. Even if you have a great guitar, if you don't have a great, like we were saying earlier, if you don't have a good transmission and stuff behind your engine, it's going to be terrible.
Oh, yes.
I don't know if this is an owning thing as much as like maybe it's just
You show up to the
two are
gig.
available.
And here's your choices.
Yeah, we don't. What's the setup for this, Jared?
Rig A,
Well,
Rig B.
You're gonna open for Led Zeppelin. They got back together.
They got back together.
Okay, no
You
way.
and Bonham?
That's crazy. So on your way to go get a beer, you accidentally trip old man Jimmy Page, and he can't perform. You have to go up there instead, and there's two things up there, and you get to choose one of those.
He says, you
that's- is that
you can't
something you'd
play
say?
me guitars.
You know what?
want my
that's-
amps.
That's how it is.
All right, Tony.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to have to go with Zach on this because you can make a crap guitar sound pretty good through an amp, but you can make a really great guitar sound really bad through a bad, in this case, like headphone amplifier. I just don't think there's any way to make that sound good.
Let's go to Joe Bonamassa. What do you say? No, just kidding. All right.
He would run.
Yeah. How about Sean? How about you, buddy?
Well, I'll say it in two sides. One, my very first guitar was a first act, and I have post-traumatic stress from playing that guitar. My fingers are cut up beyond belief. But I mean, like you said, it's like if you're playing for a show and it's for that, I would go for the cheap guitar with the nice amp.
Solid. All right, Jared.
I almost went the opposite of the three before me just now. However, you guys are bringing up a really hard to argue point. You can always set up a cheapo guitar to play decent, and it's going to sound fantastic through that amplifier. So I'm going to have to go with the cheap guitar, awesome amp.
All right. Well, I am going to go with the Burst. Not because necessarily it's a Burst. It's just I don't like playing guitars that are really that bad. Like, just it's hard. It's not a pleasure to play. If I'm not having fun, it's going to show. I'm not going to play a good song. It's not going to be good. Everybody's going to know that. So if I've got...
So you must play a lot of garbage guitars.
I've had my share, let me tell you that.
That's a good point, though.
Yeah, and really, it does. For me, it does come down to that because I think maybe I got a couple good pedals up there and a good tech or something that can maybe help me out. I'm not really sure, but first and foremost, if I'm having a hard time playing it, it's going to change everything. So,
that's a really good would you rather because it's super. I mean, you've got two options, neither of which is really ideal.
Right. No.
Yeah.
Kind of to add to that, I actually did a video on something very similar to that, where I had actually taken my 1959 Gibson ES 175 and I plugged it into a $15 amp from like Music Round. But I did run that amp into a 412 cab, which made a big difference. And then I took like an Epiphone and I ran it into my hand-wired Plexi. And I did a video on that comparing the two. And you'd be surprised about the number of people that actually preferred the sound of the cheaper guitar just because of that amplifier.
Curious. Well, that was pretty fun. So I encourage all of you listeners that are downloading this to then let us know. What do you think? What would you like us to answer for the...
Would you rather?
Well, he got 3 in today.
I know. It's a special day. All right, Tony, we need to thank a few people.
We certainly do.
Let's do it.
So at this time of the show, as Todd sort of alluded to earlier, alluded to, not eluded. No, he alluded.
I preluded, actually.
Did you?
Yeah.
Well, either way, whatever. It's immaterial. But we like to thank a special group of people who help sponsor our podcast.
Right.
At this particular level, this is the executive producer level. If you go to patreon.com/the guitar knobs, you will find various levels that you can participate as a sponsor. And that ranges from a very low amount up to the executive producer
And this
level.
helps us keep the lights on. It literally helps us keep the lights on because
That's right.
we have to.
Zach, can you turn that light off
Please
over
don't
there?
turn the
We're
lights
running
on.
a
They
little
may
low
not
right now.
turn back on.
It's cold, too.
This gets t-shirts made. This gets stickers made.
So anyhow,
it's all the things.
You get it. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into
us
this
out tremendously.
and every bit helps.
Yep.
And even at the smallest levels, you get some great prizes, some buttons and picks and little things. And as you graduate up to the executive level, executive producer level, you get some really great stuff. And
You get to have your name read on the thing.
so that's what I'm going to do right now.
Yep. Do it.
All right, let's start from newest to oldest, shall we? So, as we talked about earlier, welcome, Brian Robinson.
All right.
Jonathan Jerusik, Ken Sayers, Corey Nigro, Doug Gann, Brad Partridge, Michael Van Zant, Doug Christ, Darren Gregory, Robert Marfleet, John Anglin, Chris Kearney, Sean S., Oliver Gonzalez, John Daly, Robin Smith, Pete Marshall, Carlos Mancha, Matt Brammer, David Wolfson, Martin Cliff, and Tom Brazen.
All right. Thank you guys so very much. And as we mentioned before, even at that $1 and $5 level, it's $12 for a whole year. That's it.
Can't even get a cup of coffee for that.
And you're a Patreon.
Oh, yeah.
It's fantastic. So we really appreciate your help. Please think about doing that this year. It would mean a lot to us. We want to say a great big fat thank you to our friend Sean Arbow of Gunstreet Wiring. Where can people find you?
Oregon.
Or you can find me at Bend, Oregon, dead center. You can find me online at gunstreetwiringshop.com or Instagram. We're also on Facebook, but we mainly focus on Instagram. Or you can just email me. I'm very easy to get a hold of. Because Gunstreet is really about giving back to the community and with our profit transparency and how I want to get most of our profits either back to improve ourselves, but mainly give back to the people who help promote the community. I want to give the guitar knobs and your guys' fans your own custom 15% off coupon code. So if you go to my website, and it's going to be on the website only, if you type in guitar knobs, you'll get that free discount all the way to the end of the year. So 2020, you're too late. If you
Wait, which year? End of
use
what year?
This year.
Oh, the new
All
year.
of 2019.
You're
You're talking almost nearly
The whole
12
year.
months
12 months.
2020, you're too late.
Discount
2020, you're late.
opportunity.
Wow.
And you take 15% off using coupon code Guitar Knobs.
Wow, that is awesome, man. Thank you so much. And you can use the money that you save and go be a Patreon.
Hey, that's a capital idea.
I love it.
That's the only condition.
I like that. Yeah. No, that is. I am so appreciative of that, and I promise you, people, you will be happy. You will have a smile when you open up a package that comes from Gunstreet Wiring. He puts a lot of thought into it, and it's much appreciated. Thank you so much for offering that to our audience, my man.
Of course, thank you.
Let's see. Let's start with Zach real quick. Zach, where can people find you?
You can find me at my name, Zach Oswald, on YouTube and Facebook.
Okay, excellent. I don't know what I don't know what an excellent is. Sorry,
Excellent.
It's a little bit better than excellent.
Yeah. Okay, Tony Baloney.
Yeah, where can they find me?
Yes.
In Columbus, Oregon.
Okay.
No.
Hey, that's next to me.
Yeah, I'm right there.
There you go.
But no, go over to pickguardian.com. Let's say you need a custom pick guard. You want to change. Let's say you want to do something crazy like put tele pickups in a Strat.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's just do it.
Or a mini humbucker.
Or a mini humbucker.
And a jazz blaster. Telecaster.
Blastered.
But yeah, go over to pickguardian.com, drop me a line. You can also go over to Instagram. I post a lot of some of the projects that I'm working on outside of pick guards from time to time with building and different things like that. So check out some of those fun projects and
Cool.
Just let me know.
Oakley dokley.
I'm going to just say one little nugget about Pick Guardian. This dude can work his magic. Trust him. He does really good stuff.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Jared.
So you can find me, Jared, at Brandon Wound Pickups, BrandonWoundPickups.com. Browse around the website. You'll find that I do new aged-looking stuff, old-looking stuff, custom guitars. I also do rewinds. And just look me up, Jared at BrandonWoundPickups.com.
Cool. And you can drop me a line at Todd at theguitarknobs.com. We love to hear from you. Please share your thoughts. And everybody, have an awesome guitar week. And subscribe!
Yeah.
Supposed to do hello.
Hello.
All right, beautiful.
That's how you got to start it.
Well, that's it for these knobs. Please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/theguitarknobs. Visit our website at theguitarknobs.com for all of our past episodes, 4 on the Floor blog, and other good stuff. You can connect with us on social too at our Facebook page and share your gear and stories on our Facebook group. Also, be sure to check out our Instagram at Guitar Knobs. Catch you next time.